Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Tech Chat. Now in today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Paul Dant, who is the Vice President of Product Management at Digital AI. So Paul, welcome to the show and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks. Hi Max, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome, and I'm looking forward to our discussion because we're going to be going a bit topical because we're going to be talking about the threats facing global critical infrastructure and really how organizations can properly secure the software that's crucial to protecting it. So I wanted to kick off the show here, Paul, by just kind of asking you to start with, what are the most common methods of attacks that criminals are using to hack into critical infrastructures?
Right. Most commonly, we're going to see various types of malware, whether it's ransomware, as we've seen in a lot of cases globally, targeting healthcare facilities. Stuxnet was an interesting one, featuring a combination of malware that utilized social engineering, literally dropping USB thumb drives into parking lots in order to get that malware in. Those types of strategies are going to continue to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting as well because there was a cybersecurity report that came out. It was KPMG's 2020 Control System Cybersecurity Report. And the highlight in that was that, approximately 75% of the control systems that manage the critical infrastructure really is struggling and cannot defend itself against cyber attacks, which is kind of an alarming percentage to see, isn't it? So do you think that this is down to controllers, often running outdated software? What is the impact of all of this?
It's definitely a combination of outdated software, vulnerable new software. We still see, at least from my perspective, a real lack of security education when students pursue a computer science course of study. There's really not a lot about security being taught to developers even today. So that leads to new software presenting vulnerabilities as well. But I think really the core issue of all of this is or ineffective threat modeling. You can have extremely up-to-date software that is free of vulnerabilities, but from your perspective, it's free of vulnerabilities. But if you don't really try to enumerate risks, the impact and the likelihood, those threats really being carried out, if you don't understand what you're protecting against, you can't possibly defend.
This is very true. And this is a subject that comes up quite often when we're talking to organizations, and whether it's not having cybersecurity training in place or, feeling that a form is a good enough kind of approach to training. But where do you see the kind of areas that people can focus on in relation to getting around this?
I think threat modeling is critical. I'll mention that one again. I came into this industry organically. I started coding as a kid, got into hacking, got really interested in it, got really good at it, built a career around it. We don't have a lot of those people left anymore. It was a very specific sort of generational thing that led to those, 90s, early 2000s hacker groups. And it's a unique perspective that it's difficult to get if you're interested in a career in cybersecurity, you start taking all these security product courses, learning about WAFs and database security, but you're skipping over the fundamental elements of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And if we really could get back to basics, I hate to say this in the business context, but slow things down a little bit. We don't like to hear or say that much, but getting back to basics and really understanding what is it are we trying to protect? Who or what are we protecting it from? How do we protect it? And then at the end of the day, how much money are we going to spend to protect it?
Yeah, which is always very key questions for businesses to address, especially at the moment. It's so key to be kind of having these conversations, and then we're not going to be seeing these, controllers or sensors being overrun or issues coming up about it. So another element I wanted to talk about is how can we kind of get around this outdated software issue that a lot of organizations are facing? Is this down to, again, you were saying then, people not slowing down, rushing ahead and not checking these systems are up to the standard that they need to be?
Right. I look at these things as kind of history repeating itself. This isn't the first time we've realized the dangers of malware. I remember finding a version of Michelangelo on a floppy disk when I was a kid. Malware existed then and could do really bad things. So I think really what we need to do is get away from the notion of putting something in front of things that are vulnerable. If we look at, ICS in particular, these controllers, if they are vulnerable, the best thing to do is understand how they're vulnerable and fix that. And that will likely involve some slow down a bit. But if we're not willing to take that approach to pump the brakes, particularly where there's a lot of risk involved, massive breaches of healthcare information, as an example. Those types of compromises can be very, very damaging to a lot of people. It's worth slowing down for, and we need to be able to convince management of that. Because after all, the security mentality, it has to come from the top down.
Yeah.
And if we're cutting corners at the top and ignoring risks, it's going to trickle down to the bottom.
Yeah, completely. Do you reckon this comes down to, I always like to ask the question, how do you get through to those board members, and how do you kind of shake people by the shoulders to let them know? Is it a cost? Is it a time turnover? What areas do you think need to be focused on?
Yeah, it's a good one. One of the things that I do think is effective in the right situation that we've kind of lost the art of is, the real penetration test. Low to zero disclosure, understanding of how an attacker could start from nothing and gain something. They're expensive. It's hard to staff them, so it's not a scalable practice. Automation just takes the human element out of it completely. But I do think that if organizations were inclined, especially really large organizations where there's a lot on the line, they could make these things happen. They could perform something like this, and you could lower cost of an effort like this by bringing in expert advisors, but utilizing your own resources that probably have a lot of skills that haven't even been tapped into yet.
Yeah, definitely. It's that understanding of what you have and what is needed in order to really push forward. And especially, as you said, when you're talking about large organizations or global critical infrastructures, we've been mentioning as well at the start, that is so critical. And we've seen a lot of stuff coming out recently about targeting those global infrastructures. So is there any kind of last minute advice you would kind of give to organizations around making sure that, these elements, these infrastructures are so imperative for not just organizations, but people across the world? How can they really take steps here?
Yeah. My best advice is, take the time to inventory and truly understand assets, everything from back-end databases to crypto keys to non-technical things. Put the effort in to truly understand where the most critical risks are. Focus energy, resources on those areas. But another real benefit of threat modeling is that we have the critical risks on one side of the spectrum. We have some of the, maybe we'll call it lower hanging fruit, lower risks that still need to be addressed. And through this exercise, you can really develop a program that will the right focus on the right things at the right time.
Cool. Well, like I say, thanks for coming on this episode of Tech Chat and giving your expertise on all of this. Thank you, everyone who took the time to watch this episode. We do hope you took a lot away. If you're looking for more information, you can also head on over to digital.ai for some more great resources that they've got. You can join the conversation with us at EM360 on Twitter and LinkedIn. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and of course, for more great daily content, please head on over to em360tech.com.